We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Bezim and Aleph Mesechet Shekalim. This is Shekalim Daf 12a. The Mishnah says, Hamakdish nechasav, let's say somebody sanctifies his property for bedek habayis purposes, for purposes of repairing the Beis HaMikdash. V'hayu ben devarim ru'uyin lekarbanos hatzibor. And among the items that he sanctified is something that is fit to be karbanos tzibor. And as we explained on the previous Amud, we're talking here about the ketores. The person has a ketores and he sanctifies it to the Beis HaMikdash for bedek habayis. So now what do? So yinasnu le'umnin b'scharon divrei Rabbi Akiva. They should take this ketores and they should use it to pay the umnim. And what that means to say is as follows. You take the ketores, you give it to the umnim, and then you take money from the Trumas Halishka and buy it back from the workers. And now if you do that, that's going to be considered that the ketores is coming from public funds, and then you could actually use it as actual ketores. That is Rabbi Akiva's solution. Amar lo Ben Azai said to Rabbi Akiva, Eino hi amida, that's not proper. It's not proper to just take the ketores and give it directly to the umnim in that fashion. And the reason is because Ben Azai holds you're not allowed to just take hektish and use it to pay people for malacha. That's not how you're mischalal hektish. Rather, what do? You do as follows. Ela mafrishin mehen schar umnim. What you do is you take some of the other property that the person was makdish and you separate a little bit of that property and you designate it as wages for the umnim. Now you take that property and you say, I want the kedusha from this property to go onto the binyan itself, onto the binyan Beis HaMikdash itself, similar to what we said in the previous Mishnah. So now the property that you now took is now chulin, and the kedusha from that property has now gone into the binyan of the Beis HaMikdash itself. And now what you do is as follows. You take the ketores, which was sanctified, umechalin osan al mos umnin. You take the ketores which was sanctified, and you're mechalel the ketores on this property which was designated as payment for the umnim. Again, this property here that you originally took, that now became chulin. You took its kedusha off of it and you put it onto the Beis HaMikdash, and now you're taking the ketores that he had made kadosh and you're taking its kedusha and putting it onto the property that was originally hekdesh that now became chulin. V'nosnin osan le'umnim b'scharan. Now you're going to take the ketores, which no longer has kedusha. You're going to give it to the umnim as their wages. That already is more appropriate because now it doesn't have the kedusha anymore. You can pay them with the ketores. V'chozrin v'lochim osam mitruma chadasha. Then you take the truma chadasha, meaning money from the trumas halishka. You then purchase the ketores from the umnim. So now the umnim have money that is now chulin, and we've now purchased back from public funds the ketores. We can now bring the ketores. And the Mishnah continues, Hamakdish nechasav, again, somebody sanctifies his property. Again, lebedek habayis, that's the stam understanding. And he has, among the things he sanctified, there are animals that really are fit to be karbanos. They're males and females. So the halacha generally is that once you sanctify something that is fit for the mizbeach, einu yotze midei mizbeach liolam, that item should go to the mizbeach. So what do? So Rabbi Eliezer says, Zecharim yimachru l'tzarchei olos. The males, you should sell the males to be brought as karban ola, so that way they will be brought as a karban, and the money you're going to use we'll see for bedek habayis. Unikevos yimachru l'tzarchei zivchei shlamim, and the same thing by the nekevos. Sell those to people who are going to bring them as shlamim. Udemeyan yipluim shar nechasav lebedek habayis, and all the money that's collected will be used for bedek habayis purposes with all the rest of the property that the person donated to the Beis HaMikdash. Rabbi Yoshua says, no, Zecharim atzmon yikravu olos. Those animals that are males that were donated for bedek habayis, just bring them as karban ola. The assumption is that if it's an animal that's fit to be a karban ola, it should be brought as a karban ola. Unikevos yimachru letzarchei zivchei shlamim. Now, when it comes to the nekevos, you should sell those for karban shlamim. V'yavi b'dmeyan olos, and then use the money that you get to bring karban ola. Ushar nechasim yiplu lebedek habayis, and the rest of the property will be for bedek habayis purposes. The reason why Rabbi Yoshua makes a distinction between karban ola and karban shlamim is because karban ola is all goes onto the mizbeach. So that's okay. You could take the males and just directly bring them as karban ola. When it comes to the nekevos, if you would just bring them directly as a shlamim, that would be a problem because karban shlamim is eaten by the bailim. It doesn't only go to the mizbeach. So therefore, it's better to sell those animals as karban shlamim and use the money for karban ola, which is going to be entirely on top of the mizbeach. And the Mishnah continues, Amar Rabbi Akiva says, Roa ani es divrei Rabbi Eliezer mi divrei Rabbi Yoshua. I prefer the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that we assume even the animals were for Bedek Habayis over the opinion of Rabbi Yoshua, who assumes that the animals were designated for Kodshei Mizbeach. Rabbi Eliezer hishves midosov, because Rabbi Eliezer says that the person's intention is the same across the board. He's making everything hektish, it's all Bedek Habayis. For Rabbi Yoshua chilek, but Rabbi Yoshua is making distinctions. He's saying the animals, the intention was Kodshei Mizbeach, and the other property, the intention was Bedek Habayis. That seems less likely. Amar Rapapayas says, Shamati es divrei shnein. I can understand both of them. It depends exactly what the phraseology was. Hamakdish beferish kedivrei Rabbi Eliezer. If somebody is makdish beferish, meaning the person says, my animals and my property are lehekdish, he mentions both of them, then it makes sense to say like Rabbi Eliezer that his intention is that all of that should be for Bedek Habayis, because he's specifying the animals and the rest of my property, everything is lehekdish, it's all for the same thing. However, v'hamakdish stam, but somebody who's just makdish stam, he just says, all of my property is to hektish, so there already he might be making distinctions. He might mean that some of the property, kedivrei Rabbi Yoshua, he might mean like Rabbi Yoshua, that there is a distinction, that when it comes to things that are fit for the Mizbeach, they should go on the Mizbeach. And the Mishnah continues, Hamakdish nechasav v'hayu ben devarim ru'uyim legavi mizbeach yenus u'shmanim ve'ofos. Let's say somebody again sanctifies his property, and among his property he has things that are fit to go on the mizbeach, specifically wine, oil, and birds. Those things could be brought onto the mizbeach. So Rabbi Eliezer says, Yimachru letzarchei oso hamin. Again, the same basic idea. You should sell it for the purposes of whatever that species, whatever that kind of item is brought as a carbon. V'yavi b'dmei and olos, and then take whatever money you get and use it to bring carbon ola. Ushar nechasim yiplu lebedek habayis, and all the rest of the items which are not fit for the mizbeach, that's going to be used for Bedek Habayis. And the Gemara says, Hamakdish v'chulu lekarbono sibor. That was the first line in the Mishnah, which said that you're makdish something which is fit for carbon sibor. As we explained, it's talking about ketores. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan Amar ketores. Rabbi Yochanan says, we're talking about ketores. This is what we quoted again on the previous summit. The idea basically is the person made the ketores, and it was made from chulin, and now he's makdish it. That's exactly the case of the Mishnah. Amar Rav Hoshia says, no, that's not necessarily the case. Tiftar bu'uman mishel Beis Avtinas. You should say instead that we're talking about one of the workers from Beis Avtinas, shahayanotel bischaro ketores, that they would take as wages ketores. In other words, according to Rav Hoshia, he disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan. He says when you make the ketores initially, it has to be made from ingredients that are already kaddish. So you can't have a situation where a person makes ketores that's chulin and then sanctifies it. Rather, the case according to Rav Hoshia is you had some extra ketores, you use that to pay the uman. Now, normally what you would then do is you would take public funds and buy back the ketores from the uman. So the ketores is chulin in the hands of the worker, and then normally they would take public funds, buy it back, so now the ketores would be kadosh once again, and it would be part of the truma chadasha, and you would have paid the uman. But here, in this particular case, the guy got his extra ketores, and it was chulin biyadav now, and he decided to make it hektish. He decided he's just going to donate it straight back to hektish. He doesn't need the money. So that's the case. According to Rav Hoshia, we're talking about an uman, and the way that it became chulin was because you took the kedusha off, because it was moser, it was extra ketores. And the Gemara continues, Ma taimod ben Azai. Now, what is the reason of Ben Azai? In other words, Ben Azai said, Eino hi hamida. Ben Azai in the Mishnah said, you can't just give the ketores, this ketores that was sanctified, straight to the umnin. Rather, you have to go through this whole complicated process in order to pay them. And the answer is very, very simple. She'ena hekdesh mischalel al hamalacha el al hamos. Because according to Ben Azai, you can't take the holiness from this item, from this ketores, and just say, I'm going to use it to pay the worker, and the kedusha goes off of that onto the work that was done. That's impossible. Kedusha is not mischal an malacha. Rather, you have to be able to take the kedusha and put it onto a fixed item, and that's why Ben Azai comes up with his whole procedure that we explained in the Mishnah in order to be mechalal this particular ketores. And the Gemara continues, Tamon Taninon, we learned in a Mishnah over there. This is a Mishnah in Mesechet Tmura. Yesh bekodshei bedek habayis. There are certain chumras by kodshei bedek habayis that's more chumr than kodshei mizbeach. Number one, shestam hekdeshus lebedek habayis. If a person is makdish his property stam, we assume it goes lebedek habayis, not lekodshei mizbeach. Also, hekdesh bedek habayis chol ala kol. You can take anything and sanctify it for bedek habayis purposes, but when it comes to sanctifying for kodshei mizbeach, you can only take animals that are fit for the mizbeach or items that are fit for the mizbeach and sanctify them with kodshei mizbeach. Also, umalin bigidulein, when it comes to bedek habayis, even if there's a growth from that item, that also there's me'ilah. For example, let's say a person took a chicken and he was makdish it for bedek habayis, and then the chicken had an egg. The egg also, there would be me'ilah by that egg. And finally, ve'ein behen hanoah lakohanim. When it comes to bedek habayis, the kohanim get no benefit from bedek habayis. That's all used for the Beis Hamikdash. Masha ein kain, that is not true when it comes to kachim mizbeach. By kachim mizbeach, obviously the kohanim could get hanoah. For example, certain karbonos, the kohanim get the meat, or they get the hide of the animal, whatever it is, the kohanim could get hanoah from kachim mizbeach. And the Gemara now says, Rabbi Chananya says, this Mishnah in Tamura really follows Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah. The Taninan, because what does it say in our Mishnah? It says in our Mishnah, Hamakdish nechasav v'haisa ben behema ru'uya agavim mizbeach. If a person is makdish his property, and among his property there are animals that are fit to go on top of the mizbeach, zecharim unekevos, males and females. Rabbi Eliezer says, zecharim yimachru letzarchei olos unekevos yimachru letzarchei zivchei shlamim. The males are sold for karbonola. The females are sold for carbon shlamim, and what do you do with the money? The money is used with all the rest of the property for bedek habayis. So you see clearly, Rabbi Eliezer holds stam hektish is lebedek habayis. That's exactly what it says in the Mishnah in Tamura. And the Gemara now says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Talmud Rabbi Eliezer, the reason of Rabbi Eliezer is as follows: V'ish ki yakdish es beiso kodesh laHashem. It says in the pasuk, a person sanctifies his house kodesh laHashem. That's what the pasuk says. So b'ma anon kaimin. What exactly are we talking about over here? What is the person sanctifying? Imbe-beis dira. Now, if we're talking about a person is sanctifying his actual house, the place where he lives, that can't be because kvar ksiv, because the pasuk already says v'im hamakdish yigalas beiso. In other words, the pasuk says in the second pasuk, it says he's going to redeem his house. It repeats the word his house. So if it's repeating the word his house, that sounds like the first pasuk of v'ish ki yakdish es beiso is not talking about his house, or else it would have just simply said yigal lenu, he will redeem it, what we were talking about before. So Elokian on Kaiman, so the Gemara darshans, what's the first pasuk actually talking about? B'makdish nechasav is just saying a person takes his property stam and says it's all going to be kodesh laHashem. And so you see, what do you see from here? Mikan shestam hekdeshos lebedek habayis. From here you see when a person makes his property stam hekdesh, the assumption is it's for bedek habayis purposes. And now the Gemara continues and elaborates on this machlokus between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua in our Mishnah. Again, the machlokus in our Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, is, do we assume stam hekdesh is lebedek habayis or not when we're talking about animals that are fit for the mizbeach? So the Gemara now says, Amar Rabbi Zira, Rabbi Zira says, Reb Chona b'shem Rav, in the name of Reb Chona, in the name of Rav, Ba'ameh pligin, in what case is the machlokus Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua? B'makdish nechasav, we're talking specifically when a person is makdish all of his property. In that situation, when a person is makdish all of his property, so there's a machlokus tanoim, whether or not, again, it goes lebedek habayis, or the intention is that the animals that are fit for the mizbeach should go on the mizbeach. Avol b'makdish edro, but according to this opinion, if a person would be makdish his flock of animals, all of which are fit for the mizbeach, kolam amodi shulam mizbeach, everybody would agree, even Rabbi Eliezer would agree that the understanding is he's being makdish it for the mizbeach. Rabbi Ba, Rav Chona b'shem Rav. Now, however, Rabbi Ba in the name of Rav Chona, in the name of Rav, says, Ma pligin, what is the machlokas Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua? But makdish edro, on the contrary, they're arguing specifically when you're makdish, when the person is makdish his flock of animals. In that case, again, Rabbi Yoshua assumes it's for the mizbeach. Rabbi Eliezer assumes it's for bedek habayis. Avol b'makdish nechasa, but a person is just makdish all of his property. Kolam amodi shula bedek habayis. Everybody would agree with what Rabbi Eliezer said in the Mishnah that it goes lebedek habayis. So the Gemara now says, Al daite de Rabbi Zeira nicha. We understand better the position of Rabbi Zeira. Rabbi Zeira, who says that when you're makdish the flock, it goes lemizbeach, that makes sense. V'kasha al de Rabbi Ba, but it's difficult the position of Rabbi Ba. Behema lo lemizbeachi. Do you mean to tell me that a behema, a bunch of animals, are not on the mizbeach? It makes no sense to say that if a person sanctifies his flock of animals, that in that case anyone that Rabbi Eliezer would actually say it goes to the bedek habayis. No one should say that it goes to bedek habayis in that case. In that case, for sure, it should go to the mizbeach. So the Gemara answers, no, behema lemizbeachi. The Gemara answers, no, if a person was being makdish animals for the mizbeach, even if it's only animals, even if it's the person's entire flock, they're going to specify, they're going to say clearly that it's lemizbeach. V'lama sasam ha'ish hazeh. Why was this guy Why did this guy just say it's stam? Why didn't he say the word to the Mizbeach? Shehu ka'omer lo yeh el lebedek habayis. That's what Rabbi Eliezer thinks. Rabbi Eliezer thinks the fact that the person did not say the word Mizbeach shows you that it's going lebedek habayis. So that's how we could defend that position. We could defend the position which says by in a situation where it's makdish edro, yes, Rabbi Eliezer does say it goes lebedek habayis. And the Gemara continues with a third opinion that explains the machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo shanyahi, there is no difference. It doesn't make a difference if the person sanctified all of his property. Doesn't matter if he sanctified all of his animals. In both cases, it's the exact same machlokes, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. Hamakdish, he hamakdish nechosav, he hamakdish edro, he hamachlokes. Doesn't matter if he sanctified all of his property. Doesn't matter if he sanctified his flock of animals. It's always a machlokes, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Eliezer again assumes that it's bedek habayis. Rabbi Yoshua says, if it's something that's fit for the Mizbeach, then we assume it's Kadshe Mizbeach. And the Gemara continues, Rav Chona b'shem Rav, Rabbi Avo b'shem Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Chona in the name of Rav, Rabbi Avo in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, says as follows, Kadshe bedek habayis. Let's say you have Kadshe bedek habayis, shapodon tamimin, that you try to redeem them and they have no mum. In such a situation, since you took this animal and you didn't make it hektish for the Mizbeach, rather you made it hektish for bedek habayis, yatzu lechulin. You can redeem it even when it has no mum, and it goes lechulin. The redemption works properly. That's what they're saying. Kadshe bedek habayis can be redeemed even without a mum. And the Gemara now says, Mas Nisan Amrakain. The truth is, there's a Mishnah that supports this. This is a Mishnah in Tmura, says exactly what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. Because what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, Valdon v'chelbon mutter la'achar pidyonan. The Mishnah over here is saying that if you have the babies or the milk, let's say coming from Kadshe bedek habayis, we are lenient even on the babies and the milk. If you redeem it, they are mutter. That's not true by Kadshe Mizbeach. By Kadshe Mizbeach, if you redeem Kadshe Mizbeach, the babies and the milk from the Kadshe Mizbeach is still going to be aser. By Kadshe bedek habayis, we're more lenient, and the assumption of the Gemara here is that the Mishnah means that you redeem the Kadshe bedek habayis even without a mum, and that's why this Mishnah supports Rabbi Yochanan. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis.